Welcome, everybody. So excited for another session of Impactful Insights. Today, I'm with Marc Levine of Improv My Sales. Love what we're going to talk about today. Love that Marc is so much into company culture. So, I knew I would have a good time the first time I met Marc. And today, we're really going to talk about courageous conversations. And, Marc's going to talk about it from my perspective. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people take extraordinarily hard actions to avoid crucial conversations and courageous conversations. And I've seen people spend literally years not having these difficult conversations. And, these tools and tactics that Marc are going to talk about, have an impact not only on your business life, and certainly businesses who don't make decisions typically end up plateauing at some point, but this is also something that helps you in your personal life, because oftentimes we need to have courageous conversations within our family, within our social group as well. So Marc, why don't you do a quick introduction about yourself and your firm, and we'll start talking about courageous conversations.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. I love your framing, first of all, about how important these things are. And one of the fun things that happens with our clients who span the gamut from financial services to healthcare is people tell us they use this at home. One of my favorite stories is a client, because we do training. We're a training company, and we use improv comedy to help people be better salespeople, better leaders, and better teammates. And ultimately, we're teaching them how to have courageous conversations in the workplace. Well, what's funny is people use it at home. And most of our training is done over time, so people have a chance to go out and practice, because practice builds the skill. And one of our clients came in on a Tuesday and said, I used it this weekend when my fiance and I were fighting over what food to serve at our party. I said, all right, tell me more. Well, she has a friend who's vegan, and she wanted to have vegan food. And I said, we already have enough food, and we're going and we're fighting. And then I remembered something you taught me about validating their world, making them right. And I said to my fiance, I can tell that you really care about your friend and you want to make sure she's cared for. And he said, when I said that, my fiance melted. Totally changed the conversation we were having. So you learning to do this at home with the people you care about the most, your stakeholders, your partner, your husband, your wife, and then do it in the workplace, the place that you spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week, creates happiness, reduces stress, and ultimately increases revenue.
Absolutely. So let's first start with the definition, right? Because not every courageous conversation is about vegan food, although that certainly could be.
Yes, courageous conversations are
a significant number of them. But why don't you define, what is a courageous conversation? And I think that's a definition that changes in the moment, I would think, as well.
Absolutely. So what's the first part of that, courageous? So we might feel a lump in our throat when we're approaching the topic. We might think there's something at stake and we can lose if we're not successful. It's the feeling that we know this is important to have, and if we don't have it, it may change the relationship. And the second part is the conversation. It's a two-way exchange. It's me saying, hey, David, I want to talk to you about your performance. Performance conversations fit into courageous conversations. Hey, David, you're my client, and I know here's something that we see with our accounting clients. They scope out work, they get a new client, and then there's more work than they thought. And now they have the choice of either going to the client, you're nodding and saying, hey, David, you've seen this, right? Of going to the client and saying, David, we scoped out this work, and that's what we can deliver for you. And there's so much more. So let's talk about what that is, and then additional compensation for it. The opposite of that is there's so much work. You don't talk to the client because you're afraid of losing the relationship, and you eat it, and it costs you thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, you build up resentment. Courageous conversations are around, hey, I noticed that we're butting heads in our executive meetings. And I'm the chief sales officer and you're the CFO. And every time I want to talk about a discount for a client, you go like this. So we're not just talking about the content, about what's the best pricing. We're talking about our process. We're talking about how we relate to each other. Those are some examples of courageous conversations.
And so let's talk a little bit more about process, because all of us have conversations our all life, right? And you talked about we do this over time so people can practice. So I am assuming that this isn't just, hey, just have another conversation and just talk about the thing that's, making you sweat. So why don't you talk a little bit about the process and how you teach people how to have these conversations effectively, because we know some people avoid them and sometimes it costs them tens of thousands of dollars. Some people do them ineffectively and it turns out that they're fighting with their, as you talked about before, with their fiance about something. So why don't you talk a little bit about that process and a little bit of the steps in order to accomplish those?
Yeah, sure. And I want to back up for a second and talk for a moment about why we don't have these conversations or where they go wrong. And you hit a couple of the places. What we typically see is people either on one side avoiding them. So then I work for you and I'm not getting feedback on my performance. And you think there's something there's a criteria I'm not meeting and you're not telling me. And then you're upset that I'm not getting to the performance. And then I find out months later that you had feedback for me and the damage to the relationship. People don't do these because they're afraid that if the person may not change if they hear it, or they don't have these conversations also because I may hurt the relationship, I may make it worse. And what we typically see with our clients is clients feel more connected after having the conversation. The person who wants to have it feels this big sense of relief. Because you know the feeling when you can't have a conversation with someone? That feeling of walking on eggshells?
Not fun.
Oh, about 20 years ago, social psychologist Amy Edmondson identified that as the feeling of having psychological safety or not having that within a team. And that psychological safety is essential for having an effective team. Google did a study and they figured out 5 attributes for their top teams. They did a 2-year study, and that's psychological safety, the ability to have these conversations, the ability to take a risk, the ability to ask for help or challenge is vital. So we don't have them because we're afraid we're going to lose something. We're afraid someone's not going to change. And the 2 other things we see is people didn't have models. I didn't have a manager who was great at having conversations, who taught me they were important and taught me how to do it. And the other thing we see is that if people don't practice, it just becomes knowledge. So when we teach, we focus both on the emotional aspect of it. We talk about emotional intelligence and that feeling of fight or flight or fear. We have people identify which one they go into. Then we talk about how to calm themselves so they can actually feel comfortable as possible to have the conversation. And then we teach them some of the skills, some of the things to do up front to help connect. And then we send them on their way to go practice. We always give people the assignment, go out and have 2 courageous conversations. You don't have to have the biggest ones. You can start small. You can even do it at home. Come back and report, and then we teach more skills. And then there's the improv component.
So let's get to that. So
yes.
So let's talk about improv a little bit. Let's get to yes and let's get to improv. So
yeah. Oh, so first of all, doing this is so important. And then the improv is an important part of how we teach. So improv comedy is actors going on stage and creating a reality, a scene that often feels real, feels funny, and sometimes emotional. Have you seen improv? in person or on TV?
I certainly have. I've actually done a little improv training, which is why I know
Okay,
it's
you've done
all
a little
about
improv
yes.
shit. So what's interesting is the people who are really good, the people on whose light ends it anyway, they're highly talented, but they're also playing by a set of rules. Yes, even though it's unscripted, there's a set of rules. And these rules build relationships. So here are a couple of the rules. Make your partner look good. Listen at a level 10. Be willing to drop your own ideas and build on the ideas of your partner. And when improvisers do that on stage, that's where the magic happens. Well, could these be good in life? Could these be good at work? In a conversation, if I'm willing to back off of my idea and drop it for a better solution, wow, that might be good. If I'm willing to listen to David deeply and not be thinking about the next thing I'm going to say, I might hear something. If my goal is to try to make David look good, wow. So we teach these principles while also teaching the skills. And we do a variety of activities that are fun, where people are laughing and learning. And then the learning also becomes visceral. And when it's visceral, it sticks.
Absolutely. So I just found out, a little bit nervous about this, that we're actually going to do an improv activity here, a demo. So this has not been scripted or planned. All I really know is I'm supposed to say yes, and now I know I'm supposed to make Mark look good, I guess. So so a little bit nervous, and I guess I'm having the critical conversation. So Mark, I'm a
You're
little bit
having a,
nervous.
yeah, you're
And
being
so let's
courageous
hit it,
right now.
baby.
Yeah. So let me tell you about the process before we go into it. We know
Yes.
that people get nervous. You know, I get nervous too. I get nervous when I'm introducing these ideas because I don't know exactly how it's going to go. I get nervous before I go on stage to perform. So what we always do is we start out slowly. We do things that are low risk, and we're going to play an improv activity that practices the skills of listening and building on the idea of the other person. And all you're going to do is say a word, and the phrase reminds me of. So here's how it's going to go. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to give me a word, and I'm going to give you a prompt to do that. Once you say that word, I will repeat the word, and then I'll say, reminds me of. And then I will say another word. You will hear my word, you'll repeat my word, and then you'll say, reminds me of. And we'll keep going 5 or 6 times.
All right. I'm willing to give it a shot.
You willing? All right. So we're in the month of January. You live in New Jersey. It's winter. What's one word that you associate with winter?
Cold.
Cold. All right. So now I repeat the word cold, and then I say a word that reminds me of. Cold reminds me of sweater. You repeat sweater, and then you say what that reminds you of.
Sweater reminds me of Dr. Huxtable.
Okay, Dr. Huxtable. Dr. Huxtable reminds me of television.
Mm. Television reminds me of watching Survivor with my kids when they were little.
Okay, great. Excellent. And I love that you gave a phrase, and if you can condense it down to one word.
Oh,
But I'll
sorry.
just take Survivor. Survivor reminds me of island.
Island reminds me of chill.
Chill reminds me of relaxation.
Relaxation reminds me of water.
Perfect. Let's stop there.
Did I do okay, first of all? Because
You
I'm
did
worried about
great.
my abilities here.
You did great. So let's, for a second, we started with the word cold. And what word did we end up with? What was the last word you said?
Water, I believe.
Yeah. So isn't it interesting? Just through this free association, we went from cold to water. The other thing is, so what made this work? You listened to my word. I listened to your word. And then I just added a word onto it. I built onto your idea. What we just did are the fundamental building blocks of great improv scene. They're the fundamental building blocks of great communication and collaboration. Listen, build on the ideas of someone else.
Well, so that was awesome. So Mark, I know I love communication and collaboration. So if a firm wants to learn more about communication, collaboration, improv, increasing sales, why don't you do a quick little pitch for you and your firm?
Well, I think you just said it. You said it all. If a firm wants to increase their sales, if you want to increase the leadership capability, if you want to have teams work better together, and you want to have people connect and learn and have these conversations in the workplace, if you realize that you're losing productivity, you're losing sleep, reach out to us, improvmysales.com or Marc, M-A-R-C, at improvmysales. We'll be happy to help. I want to let you finish with this thought. It's not natural to have courageous conversations in the workplace. It's not natural for all the reasons we talked about. But when it happens, it's magical. And it doesn't have to be the way it is, that you lose sleep, that you're less productive, that you lose revenue. We can help you fix it.
And like most things, it's about learning a new skill, learning a new process. You have the ability, you just don't have the tools yet to be effective.
Exactly. And the courage.
And the courage. So this is David Wolfscale. I'm the leader of C-Suite Impact. Mark, again, knew we would have a great time. Culture, chemistry, collaboration. Those are all things that are near and dear to my heart. For our audience, I appreciate you spending a couple minutes with us. I hope you have some insights that you can take back, some things to think about. So Mark, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, and go crush the day, everybody. Thank you.